Okay, this episode of our podcast is with Lyndsay Surmacz. Surmacz.
Surmacz.
Surmacz, okay.
Yes.
I have a very short memory. I'm not great with names, but she's here to help me. And this podcast is untold stories, entrepreneurs, and interesting people. And Lyndsay falls into both of those categories. We met at a PBX, like a lot of my guests met at a networking meeting. Mm-hmm. You were there for the purposes of marketing and what you do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure who introduced us, but I think you actually walked up and said, hey, you're a video producer. I want to talk to you.
Yeah, and you also, I saw Blue Mars on your tag, on your name tag. I'm like, hey, what made you come up with that title? Right. And I'm like, there's actually something on Mars that's nicknamed the Blue Scorpion.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
managed to be the astronomy nerd in one fell swoop. So
yeah, I'm kind of an astronomy nerd because that's where we may connect, because I follow a lot of astronomers on TikTok and every channel. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I love the stuff he talks about, and that stuff interests me. But when I asked you what you did, mm-hmm. I thought that is something that I've never heard that anyone else did. So I'm not going to even try to describe it. I've tried to tell people, hey, I got this woman named Lyndsay coming on my podcast, and she does this theme called S.T.E.A.M, but it's really STEAM. But I had a hard time describing it, so I'm not even going to try. So
that's fair.
What does Lyndsay do? What is Starry Messenger? I know that.
Yes.
But what is Starry Messenger?
The Starry Messenger is an educational outreach initiative that I direct as an independent artist, through which I teach young learners science and literacy through circus arts. So to reflect on what you said about it being STEM and STEAM, for those who may be listening may not be as familiar, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And there, especially in the past 10, 15 years, there's been a very dedicated push from government, from schools and communities to promote the idea of STEM learning and hands-on learning in the classroom in order to cultivate a 21st century pipeline of workers and thinkers. Mm-hmm. And eventually at one point I said, we really need to think seriously about putting the A in there to make it STEAM. And the A, of course, is the arts. And you know how these things work and they evolve. It becomes like a bigger acronym and it's more alphabet soup. But I really identified with that pretty hardcore early on. I started my professional career, like interning in college to this point, in informal science education. And talk about circuitous roots. I come from a background of the performing arts, but when I realized, you know what, we can talk about science this way too. We can use the arts as language to talk about science topics. Then I was like, how much time did I waste thinking that science wasn't my thing? And that, that's a big, long story that we could spend like a whole other hour and a half talking about. But the present day has me putting all of my educational and professional experiences into a blender, making a smoothie and say, hey, I like to teach young people science through art.
That's fascinating. I think, again, this is one of my personal philosophies, that art is not thought of as something that has a place in a capitalistic world, because a lot of parents kind of steer their kids away from art with this thing that art doesn't make money. Don't do art because there's no money in art.
Yeah, I've heard that.
My background as a communicator is mostly artistic related. Mm-hmm. It's an art, and it's known as you're a starving artist, and some people want to negotiate with you. Like you're a starving artist. You hear about this. You never hear about starving engineers. You never hear about starving scientists, or starving doctors. It's always a starving artist, and that it creates this that people don't realize. You look around you, everything has art involved in it.
Yes.
So art doesn't get the respect it needs. Now, also, my wife is a seamstress, so she's very creative. She makes dresses.
Yeah.
My daughter is an artist. She draws, and she's in theater. And I did not want her to think that was something you do on the side.
Yeah.
You can make money doing anything.
Yes.
But art is so core to what humans are.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things we did. We did
Exactly.
engineering, but we also painted on cave walls.
Exactly.
And at the same time, we made pyramids, but we also drew and we made art and carved. But somehow art wasn't a thing to make money. It just became this thing where, however you believe the education system was developed, it became a thing that we don't really need that. So it's pushed aside, and art is so suppressed right now, it seems. So when I saw what you were doing, I think that there's one universal knowledge, and it includes art as part of the communication part of it. And that's why I was so intrigued about what you did. You're actually telling people, art's okay.
Yeah.
It's part of all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's all connected. So take me through one of your days or one of your exhibitions, or what do you call them? You go and you do it. It's a show? You call it a show?
Well, I can do it in a number of iterations, actually.
Okay.
I can go to a venue and set up an exhibit space. Like I have a little 8-foot table, and I have some of my props set up, and I, juggle in front of people, something like that. And I engage with people as they come up to me at their leisure. I can also do this as a show. I've done it as about a 30-minute show with audience interaction as well. And I finally last year got to the point where I was doing a show and a workshop series in a school over the course of like 8 or 9 weeks. So that is, to just piggyback off of what you're saying about the strength of the symbiotic relationship between science and the arts is that it can live in like multiple formats like this. So that's one of the things I love about Starry Messenger so much. If I am in an exhibit type situation, like let's say I'm in the lobby of Carnegie Science Center, or just this past weekend I was actually at the EQT Children's Theater Festival downtown with the Cultural Trust. That looks like a couple different things. I will say, hey, partner, where do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? Like, hey, we have this space set up for you. Or in the case of the festival, like we have these spots that you can roam around to. And basically they say, just do your thing. I'm like, okay. So what I do, for instance, like I carried this guy around with me. This is my Planet Parade hat box. And I'll take stuff out of it, like I want to play with my, my North Star contact juggling ball for a little bit. Or I have these hold on, let me get my 3 favorites, my 3 go-tos. My Planet juggling balls, these are made out of balloons and rice.
Okay.
And I just paint them. So right here I have Earth, and I have Mars, and I have Venus, which is, it's us and our 2 next door neighbors. So this, I'll just go around to places or just stand in one place and wait for people to come up to me, basically.
Direct their attention.
And then they come up, they see a juggler. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. And then what I like to do a lot of times, I do this on purpose, is I will drop Planet Earth and say, oh, my friend, will you rescue Planet Earth for me? And they do. They hand it to me, and they can feel it, so they have a bit of a tactile experience in there, too. And I say, yeah, do you recognize these planets? So now we're talking about planets. And they said, sometimes they don't know. And I say, like, this is Earth, this is where we live, and these are our next door neighbors. This is Mars, and this is Venus. So it's a lot of times a tool-driven conversation that leads us into talking about the science. But they first engage with it visually. They see the performance aspect going on.
What age group is interested? You say it's usually elementary schools?
Yes. So I'd say the sweet spot is like grade 3 or 4. But I'm fortunate in that I came from the museum world. And when you work in that environment, you learn to adapt a presentation for any
multiple
audience.
Ages, right? Because anybody's visiting a museum at that
so it's fun in that regard, and that I can just change my elocution or just change my my personality to a sense. Well, not really my personality, but I could talk to you about it just as fluently as I could, like maybe a 7-year-old.
So you've got a pretty good sized toolbox to adapt it to the audience.
Yes.
So when you go, let's say the venue is an elementary school.
Okay.
And the videos I've seen on your website, you're at a school on a stage, and you're doing some of it's acrobatic.
Yes.
So I'm seeing some acrobatic stuff. I'm seeing some art demonstration and some education at the same time.
Yeah.
How much of the acrobatic stuff plays into it for educational purposes on a stage? I mean, describe that show to me in a stage. Like, I see a lot of practice going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of juggling going on. There's a lot of, you do some yoga apparently or something.
Yeah,
whatever
some of that,
to make that work. So tell me, this is something that sounds difficult and complicated, and you're adjusting on the fly to an audience, but you want them to participate. Now, is a grade school, elementary school, is that ideal for you? And tell me about that performance. What's involved beginning to end? How long is that performance?
Well, usually it runs about 30 minutes. And depending on, believe it or not, if it's a smaller size audience, it tends to run a little longer. Because when there are fewer people in the audience, they want to talk to you more. And I let people talk with me. I let them engage. They ask me questions and stuff like that. So, and kids want to tell you everything they know. You know, like, let me tell you this thing.
They're
and,
excited,
it's fun. It's cool. And then, I just find my clever, polite ways of moving the show on.
Get back where you were,
yeah.
right?
But
you want to have that engagement because then they feel like you're not shutting them out. Like we're on a train, you can't stop.
Yeah.
Ask questions and then, of course, drive them back in. So that's got to be art. You got to be a little bit of a child psychiatrist at some point.
Yeah, and just as an aside, I had this interesting conversation with a principal recently. And talk about a small world. The principal that brought me in to do a show was my drum teacher in high school. So, ain't that Pittsburgh for you?
Yeah, it is. We just talked about just the relationships and how they come back.
Yeah. But he said something really interesting is that now we're living in 2023, post-COVID. A lot of these young students don't have that experience of getting together as an audience and knowing how to behave.
Oh.
They don't know the etiquette for a performance context because
that's in front of them that they can interact with and reach out and touch.
Yeah, so they were so used to so much of their early learning experience was remote and through screens and stuff like that.
That's an impressionable age at that point.
Yeah.
Because that's like your first exposure, and that's a lasting impression.
Yeah.
I guess there's a certain age that's gonna stick with them for a while.
Yeah. So in this case, this school I went to. He briefed me on that, and he said this will actually be really good for them because this is a chance for them to remember this is what we do when we're listening to a presenter, and you can clap. And I get people talking. I ask them questions, and I ask for volunteers. But to answer your original question, what I do in the course of a show, in this case, is I tell people I juggle planets. I do some acrobatic constellations, and by that I mean I have a chair that I set up, and I do a couple headstand things and a couple poses, and I wear all black, and I have these big silver stickers that I strategically place on me, and I strike these poses that make me look like a constellation or the star picture. And then I say, I'm going to invite you to make some star pictures with me, because I will, little asterisk here, star picture is not the same thing as a constellation. Another podcast. But I get up and I say, we're not going to do anything as advanced as what I just did, because I tell them I'm a professional, don't try this at home. Yeah. But what I do invite them to do is do some gentle yoga stretches, like you mentioned before. And they make the different poses that emulate some of the constellations that I have on these big foam core boards. And I do some balancing work. I have these big pool noodles. I'm that grown-up chick that travels with pool noodles in the trunk of her car.
They have 101 uses for pool noodles.
I totally agree.
You can fit into anything.
Yes, I 1,000% agree. And I introduce the concept of learning how to balance a tall object, and I have a little star at the top that they keep their eyes on. So it's mostly prop work. things that I can hold in my hands and either do tricks with them or a little bit of magic kind of sleight of hand stuff. Even though
Yeah.
magic isn't really my forte, I will teach myself a trick if I think it could go into
Right.
a
You're right. Right.
presentation.
Yeah.
So that's, and I basically go on a tour of the night sky, starting on what it looks like the stars are doing, it looks like they're spinning, and how we navigate it with like a map of the night sky, which are the constellations, and then I go out into the solar system.
Wow. So when you are bringing this into a school,
Mm-hmm.
an educational environment, the school probably wants you to somehow represent the curriculum.
Yes.
Like they're going to ask you, why are you here and what can you do to teach these kids? So how do you know that what you're doing is aligning it with the school curriculum? Do you check? Is there a
Yeah,
check and balance? Is there?
that is a really good question, and actually, it's recently changed in the state of Pennsylvania. So actually, I have homework to do. I'm fortunate in that coming from science education, I knew that what I wanted to look up were next generation science standards.
Hmm.
And even for grant writing purposes, for program development purposes, I went through and I look through the curriculum and I say, okay, this is my show. I have the show lined up. I know what I'm going to do in it. And I say, okay, it meets this requirement, it meets this, it meets this, it meets this. And that's something I keep to myself and I share with entities who are
Right.
asking. But
Decision makers or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and it's usually sufficient for me to say, yeah, this aligns with next generation science standards. Recently, the state of Pennsylvania changed the curriculum. I think the acronym is STEELS now. I haven't looked up how they compare with NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards, yet. But it's a more broad stroke would be to say, how is this, what you often hear educators say is, how is this inquiry-based? And what that means is, how does this encourage learners to get curious and formulate their own questions about the content so they can ask more questions and
Wow.
lead themselves down their own like organic path of discovery. And by asking those questions and by investigating those questions that they ask, they learn the concepts better. Like it's all encoded in a more substantive way.
Yeah. So you think the visual part of it also helps them ask the question. So you're really trying to get to are they asking you to guess what the kids are you're trying to predict or entice questions, or you doing things that elicit certain questions, like they're going to ask a question when you do this because it's odd, and they're going to say, hey, why are you doing that, or what is this for? Are you baiting for a question?
I think it depends on the format
Okay.
of what I do in a show is gonna make people wonder different things than what I do like in an exhibit format.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or a workshop format. Especially because I can have a totally different audience for a show than I would for, if I'm just setting up shop on the Rachel Carson Bridge like I
Right.
did this past fall when it was just basically like a science fair of Pittsburgh educators, basically.
Oh, cool.
If you're in a theatrical setting, basically what you're doing is telling a story. And at that point, what you're really encouraging people to do is ask questions about, like, why am I being told the story this way?
Right.
I think. So because this is a big question, and it has, I'm not sure it has like one or even two answers, but when I'm performing in any context, I think what I'm really trying to do for learners and educators alike is to say, oh, we can talk about science this way. We can
Yeah.
use like the artsy stuff, like the not just the performance art, but the handcraft, like of making our own juggling balls and dressing a certain way and using music and using I do my makeup and I wear costumes and stuff like that. And also for my artistic friends, like, oh, we could talk about science through artsy stuff. So
Right.
getting more of that, demystifying the whole right brain, left brain.
Yeah, kind of bridging
thing.
the gap between the right and the left brain.
Yeah.
That they
So
can communicate.
yeah, it's really asking people to just reinterpret and reimagine the information they've largely seen before.
I think there's a trend toward that. People trying to find a connection that isn't taught by busting kids to a school and teaching them the same thing every day the same way. That there's another way to learn that maybe has been overlooked. Are there any misconceptions about what you do that make it a struggle for you to get into schools to get what you want done? Does anybody, like, this is a show, what kind of friction do you get when you want to market yourself to a school? Because I imagine there's a lot of politics in that. You have to meet a lot of criteria. It seems to me anyway. I'm not sure about that industry.
I mean, it can, just like anything else, and especially like, you know, there's a lot of decision makers you need to meet along the way when getting into a school.
But connecting circus with, when people say, yeah, I'm going to connect circus with science.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
I think, honestly, the biggest challenge, it's not necessarily like a friction point. What's challenging is I think people have a narrow understanding of what circus is in 2023. Because, you know, a lot of people will think, for instance, oftentimes I always start my show with like, who's seen a circus before? And some people will raise their hands. Or maybe you've seen a circus on TV or on the internet. And I ask, what are some of the things you see in a circus? And 99.9% of the time they start naming animals.
Oh, yeah.
So what we have to, or at least what I choose to do, and like other circus artists that I align myself with, we have to encourage the conversation of, yes, you may have seen that. What else do you see? Trapeze. Yeah, you see trapeze. What else? And sometimes people say, like, you know, flaming hoops with motorcycles and stuff like that. Yeah, you could see that. The tradition I follow most closely is what's largely nowadays characterized as modern circus. The gold standard, if you ask most people, would be Cirque du Soleil, which is...
Doesn't usually include animals.
Yeah, never
at
does.
all, yeah.
Never does.
Yeah.
It's basically circus theater. It's very much
Yeah, they're telling a
rooted...
story, a movie show.
Yeah.
Like I've been to Vegas and I saw the Beatles. You know, that
Yes,
was
love.
fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
That was what they did when they came in the VW like a bug, and it just came apart.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, what they do to make that work. I mean, that's art circus, basically kind of what you're doing, except you're teaching.
Yeah.
Along the way.
Yeah. And also sometimes a lot of people, when they think of clowns, they think of something scary.
Like clowns.
Yeah.
Some people think clowns are scary.
Yeah. I'm like,
I don't know how that
no.
connection started. Like when you were a kid and some clown said, hey, and that just ruined you for life.
Yeah.
'Cause there's some people who just are anti-clown.
Yeah, I mean...
it's like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Don't say clown. And it's just, I never connected with it. I'm like, I don't have that fear because maybe I never went to a circus as a kid and I wasn't startled by that clown dude. But
And yeah, there's that kind of prepackaged early 20th century, late 19th century idea of a circus that I think
it's a
people
cliche.
just get.
It's
a
on
cliche.
television all the time. If you see something on circus, you're going to see, if they're talking about circus, you're going to see a guy with a lion.
Exactly.
And that's the picture. If you Google circus, you're going to see an animal and what people think. Just like when people Google Pittsburgh, they think it's a smoky city. It's been unsmoky for 100
that's a
years
really
almost.
good
But
analogy.
that is like what people still think. Like when I see pictures of Africa, there was a woman on TikTok who answered the question, how do you people in Africa live? And how do you live in the terrain? She's standing in front of like a $400,000 house with a pool. She goes, yeah, we still live in tents and villages, and we hunt for our food. They don't realize that that's the pictures you're seeing of Africa. There's another part of Africa. They have houses and suburbs and McDonald's and cities and streets, but you're just seeing the representation from never having been there.
Yeah.
So you're hearing from people who haven't been to a circus, who are just constantly bombarded with the media of what. So you're fighting that in a sense. When you say circus, you're fighting what the common misconception is of the word circus, and you're trying to connect that with entertaining, and then astronomy. It's got to be a little bit of a struggle to try and beat the overwhelming impression of what people already think of it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. And I think, though, sometimes it's just by virtue of logistics. Like, people plan things X amount of months out, and sometimes you're competing for a spot a lot of times.
Yeah.
So and just sometimes those type of relationships can take years to come to fruition.
It's on paper first. It says circus act that promotes learning. You're like, what? That's a visual thing.
Yeah,
and you're right. I'm going to be asking. I'm going to see something that makes more sense and I'm familiar with, and probably go with that, because what you're doing, no one else is doing. So you got to fight this. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's like I do pretty good at like providing a little blurb and like here's a course description for lack of a better term. But yeah, sometimes that can be a real challenge. Not just like people's pre-existing notions of circus, but oh gosh, I think I lost my thought. What was I gonna say?
Just the education part of it. And connecting the two with astronomy?
Oh, no, I remember what I was going to say. I don't know how true this is, but I wonder a lot of times people look at circus and see something that's like out here, that's unattainable, which I understand. That's part of the allure of circus, is like watch these magnificent feats of strength and flexibility,
unusual,
and just like stuff that's like superhuman. But what I would want to say to people is everything in circus is doable. I mean, it wouldn't exist otherwise, And I've said this before, like not everybody can do everything in the circus. Like I have friends who have like contortion abilities, and they can get both feet like over here like it's nothing, and I'm like, yeah, that ain't me.
That's not part of your show.
But I mean, I've made a very close group of friends that are like family to me now at a studio in the south side, Iron City Circus Arts, where we do stuff like trapeze and silks and stuff. And I'm like,
I didn't know that existed.
Oh my gosh,
how about
yes.
that? Yeah.
It's one of my homes. So
a whole other world there.
And it's like I want to tell people, guys, I walked into a circus studio at 29 years old, and I did my first pull-up at age 30. And at 31, I'm like, hey, let's teach kids space through circus. So, and it's like, I think, like people think, oh, I can't juggle. I'm like, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
You gotta learn.
It's like, right? I feel like if I can learn to juggle, anybody can learn to juggle. It's just people see it and they think, no way. I'm like, no, you can break
they
this
don't see
down.
There's a whole stigma. There's a whole other show too, that you see the end result.
Exactly.
You don't see the work that took to get to that point.
Exactly.
Like my daughter and I were driving, and there was some guys skateboarding, and they were trying to skateboard from the back, and they kept falling off the skateboard. I go, that's the part you don't see.
Yeah.
All you see are the videos of the people who can do cool tricks. You're like, wow, that's cool. But you don't see the hours and hours and hours of the dudes sitting in the parking lots, falling over and over again. You think the end result must have been, wow, overnight you just learned this.
And I think that I see myself working that into my mission to, like, I think I need to produce more content of me just failing.
And that's I think that would help people realize it. Here's you're seeing a finished product that took you how long to develop that?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do that. There's no way. There was a story I heard a long time ago. I'll never forget this. It was about this woman who went to a concert pianist. Mm-hmm. She was on stage, and this person was playing piano. It was an amazing performance.
Yeah.
And she went up afterwards and she goes, "That was an amazing. You are so talented. I would give anything to be able to play piano like that." And the pianist said, "If that were true, you would have." Because there was nothing stopping you.
Yeah.
You just didn't want it as bad as she did. You know, like I said, I tried to learn to play guitar, but my fingers are just too thick, and I'm like, I can't play guitar. And then I saw a YouTube video of someone playing guitar with their feet.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So was I making excuses, or was I just like, there's a point you have to get past the difficult parts. And a lot of people don't see that difficult part. So you just get, what do you do for a living? How did this start? Like, what is it you do on a regular basis? Is it even related? Because one day you said, at what age, 31, I want to be a performer? And
yeah, so I mean, like I said, I started working part-time. I started working at a Carnegie Science Center, and I worked there part-time for well over a decade. And then I started working in the nonprofit sector with different science education organizations, and then I eventually took a turn. I worked for a real estate company for a hot minute, and my degree is in creative writing.
okay, so you went to college for creative writing.
Yes.
Okay.
My degree is in creative writing. I originally went to be a theater minor, ended up getting a minor in music history and theory because I spent most of my time playing drums and percussion, because my secret dream was to play drums for Cirque du Soleil. And
Drums.
Yeah.
I watched that Beatles show. I never saw a drummer. Had to have some music there somewhere, but that's interesting. Maybe I missed something.
But yeah, and then I did the science education thing, kept going with that, and
I can see that
sisters,
Carnegie Science. I mean, that could be. I can see that part of this.
Yeah, I've gigged there.
Yeah,
I've gigged in the
Good, okay.
planetarium. That was where I fell in love with space, was in the Buell Planetarium. And that was actually where I had the aha moment of, oh my gosh, I actually love space. I actually love science. I took an astronomy course in college. I got an A in it. I can't remember
those are the things you need to pay attention to, but the things you did well in that you really liked, but you're not pursuing it.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me until somebody put it into an artistic context that I'm like, oh, okay, I can make science my thing. So that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. I'm like, okay, friends out there who may have once upon a time felt a little devalued because they feel more inclined toward art. Art can help you no matter what you want to do, and science can help you no matter what you want to do. So my mother has a line that education is never wasted. And I think as long as you are a good custodian of what you learn, none of what you learn has to go to waste. So learn all the art you feel drawn to, learn all the science you feel drawn to. And if you want to get on a trapeze, I know a place where you can do it.
Right.
And if you want to learn how to juggle, you can. If balls are not your thing, start with scarves. If you don't have scarves, use plastic bags.
Right.
It's doable. And I even forget the question that led us here. What were we talking about?
Well, I wanted to know what you did for a living and how that
right.
There was a tipping point at some point where you said, I'm doing this, and it's almost like it takes you till you're in your 30s to realize that I'm not really doing what I really want to do. This isn't my passion. And it's a shame that people have this feeling like, I need to do something that makes money, but not passionate about it. But there must have been a point where you said, I'm not feeling like I'm connecting all the dots in my life. And where was that point where you said, you made the connection at the Carnegie Science Center? Hey, I can put astronomy and art together. And then where did the leap to create a show, an educational show? How'd that come? Because you're an educator, you're a communicator. All right, you like those sorts of things.
Yep.
And you found a way like, hey, I like this, I like this, I like this. Let's put them all together and teach kids.
That probably happened around 4 or 5 years ago. I had started studying aerial arts at this point, and then I also
You can
grown
study
my
aerial
connect.
arts. I did not know you could. There was a.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Go on.
And then I had gotten involved with another group called the Pittsburgh Circus Arts Collaborative because I got into juggling. And they're over, because, you know, these ideas take time to germinate over the course of
Yeah.
2 or 3 years. Well, I don't know if it's that long. I can't remember. It was before the pandemic, guys. I don't remember how long it took. But eventually I was like, yeah, I can see myself doing a show where I juggle planets and talk about the solar system. And then eventually there came a point where they said, okay, here's an event. They want someone to do like kids programming. And I said, please pick me. This will force me to get content down and together and to make stuff.
To create an outline of a story you want to tell on a stage, that 30-minute story.
Yeah. And then from there it became a brand.
Yeah.
You know,
you have to at that point, yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're, I want to take a moment to talk about where I am in the present day, because I work, I'm finally getting to use my degree a little bit. I work for a marketing agency based in California. So I've joined the remote workforce, and that has been very helpful to me in pursuing this lifestyle.
I'll bet, because now you're using marketing to promote what you do. Is that the connection?
No? Well, it does give me a better fluency in marketing in general, digital marketing specifically. I work for a very great company. They're called the Get Smart Group, and it's full of like intelligent weirdos.
I think I've heard of them.
Really? They're in California. Really?
Yeah, they must promote.
Well, maybe, but it's a very, very eclectic. It's a place where I fit in. Let's just put it that way, you know. And they're also supportive of what I do in circus and education and all that stuff. They're just like, just get your work done. So I do, you know, and this isn't even my words. These are them, because I have very vocal and appreciative colleagues, and that's the culture they build. They're like, yeah, you do good work. I'm like, thank you. So I'm motivated to do more good work for them. And it's been a fun adventure living that kind of multi-potentialite career of, I've got my educational outreach here, I have my marketing job here, and I have my other circus project here, and it's very suiting for me, who's like, you know, I can't just be one thing when I grow up. Please don't tell me that, you know.
Yeah.
It works great for some people, and I think some careers that, yeah, you do need to have that laser focus of like, I want to do this very specific thing, but you also need kind of the jack of all trades to do stuff like
there's
this.
An old saying, and I hear this a lot, and it's only half the saying. Jack of all trades, master of none. That's a Shakespeare quote. That's only half of it. Master of none, comma. Oftentimes better than master of one is the rest of it.
Boom.
Because
I love
that was a 13th century thing. What it meant is that if you were a tradesperson, say you were a blacksmith, and you walked into a new town and they already had a blacksmith, then you can't make a living.
Right.
So it was good that you knew how to do more than one thing.
Yeah.
So it's cut off at that point to sound like an insult.
Yeah.
It is not the entire phrase.
Yeah.
The entire thing is oftentimes better than master of one.
Yeah.
Oftentimes. Doesn't say all the time, but it's okay to have more than one interest. I'm like that. I have a lot of different things I like to do.
Yeah.
And they're in a niche, but it's a bigger niche. But I don't want to be in one area, because I think because of all the things I do, it keeps me alive. Because not only mentally and physically, it keeps my life interesting, but it allows me to make money in different ways, because I have different skill sets that no one knows me doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So I don't mind having that. So it's okay once you realize it's okay to have more than one interest. So you can be good at more than one thing.
Yeah.
They're related. Everything you're interested in and do are related, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
I
like
find ways to relate
equestrian. It has nothing to do with your everything you do is connected in a category.
Yeah, I like to find an elegant combination of all that stuff. And I'm going to get a little philosophical for a second
That's
because
okay. That's what I'm here for.
yeah. the the whole notion, like, you gave me a Shakespeare quote, Shakespeare Renaissance, hello.
Yeah.
Where
Right.
where everybody was doing umpteen different things and finding, creative, constructive ways to use them. I see that being very much the case now that we've entered the era of AI.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, the fact that, like, yeah, I can use an AI platform to help me generate some writing content. Keyword there is help.
Right.
And I need to have a refined enough taste and intelligence to say, okay, that works, that doesn't work.
Right.
That doesn't
You have
work.
to edit it overall.
Yeah.
Don't lean on it for doing everything.
Yeah.
I like AI. Here's my favorite thing about AI. AI can do things I don't want people asking me to do anymore.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I
yeah.
like, because now they're not calling me for things I don't like doing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want me to do it because that costs too much money. So just use AI to do it until you get to the point you can afford to have someone do it for you. I don't want someone who's working in their business. I want someone who's working on their business. You want to be a DIY about everything? That's perfect. So let AI get you to the point where you can work on, you can hire someone specifically to do something. But yeah, I'm all for it.
And now that I can attend to that piece of a task or anything, that might be on my to-do list, at some point somebody's going to ask me, okay, well, how does this fit with the visual, with the graphics that we came up with? Well, I have a little understanding of graphic design too.
Right.
I can comment to that and I can speak to that. Like you and I were talking about video cameras before we hit play. So it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I know what I'm doing there. And I can find elegant ways of using all the tools that are available to me and all the media that's available to me and really use them to their maximum benefit and see how they all fit together.
Right, yeah.
So,
because at the core of it all, you're a communicator.
Yes.
You're just learning different tools to use which tools communicate what message the best.
Yes.
So there's things you're on stage you're doing that you think juggling communicates a certain thing better than something else.
Or at least reinforces
Right.
something that you may have learned before. Yes.
So when you're at a school and you've performed, have you been doing this long enough to see the effect on kids that have come to you? Like, what long-term effect has it had on the children? Has it made an impression on that lasts a long time? What is the result?
That's a good question. And it's hard to measure, especially since just as I was getting started,
How do you measure
pandemic.
impact? Yeah.
And that upended all of our lives.
Right.
And so if I'm talking about assessing a young learner's journey with this, that was just like an unprecedented level of disruption. Like, so many educators have told me, yeah, they were on track to like develop this skill and that skill, but the pandemic just backtracked them so much in certain like social and behavioral ways.
Yeah.
But
it came in and kind of saved. It was a good timing for what you do, because it helped them get out of the pandemic, right? It helped them see things.
maybe
They were so everything's on my screen because it's a screen generation, and now it's like it's not just virtual reality. They can actually see a performance and know how to handle it. So it got them back into normalization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, at this point, for me to speak about long-term effects, because if we really wanted to get into theory of like research or even education research, you need like 5 years worth of solid data.
Any feedback from teachers on impact after the
Yeah,
fact?
I mean, I have what I've collected by virtue of just conversation or my own observation, or in certain instances, I do have a pre and post survey.
Oh, good.
That
Okay.
that I administer, or people call the school. They say, "Hey, our kids talked about the circus and the stars they learned about today," and I put that on a testimonial on my website. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
right,
yes.
it's where it belongs, right?
Yeah, but I'll tell you, what fascinates me is actually happens like when I'm in the course of a show. I'll just use this as an example. When I first did the show, I was at the Children's Museum, and I was like, yeah, I've got this part of the show where I get up and I invite them to do like the yoga poses and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'll be lucky if I maybe get 50% of them to go along with that.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And they all stood up, and they're like all
Wow.
doing like just basic yoga stuff. I'm like, really? They're into
Wow.
that? And then I had a discussion about it with my mentor, like also a lifelong science educator. And it's like, yeah, like they want to get up and they want to move. You know, it's like
Just right.
it's like kinesthetic learning is a
Right.
thing.
Right,
So
yeah.
I'm like, oh wow. Yeah, I originally took that for granted that people do want to get up and they want to move.
Yeah.
And I mean the best part for me is when kids come up to me afterwards. Like they'll come up to me like right after the show. I did a show at a library a couple months back, and this girl, like, she was so sweet. She's like asking me if she could help me clean up.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, that's very sweet of you. I think I'm good. And she comes back.
How old
like,
was that little girl?
Oh, probably like 8 or 9.
Wow.
And she comes back. She has a stack of astronomy books. Like, oh gosh,
wow.
you are buttering me up, girl. But
Wow.
and she was there with her mom, and they were both very sweet. And like this couple of shows I did at this elementary school where my drum teacher was the principal, like the young kids, they're like hugging me afterwards.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, really? You're giving me a hug for
Yeah.
juggling Saturn? Like, really? I'm like, it's so sweet of you. And
Yeah.
you know, and it's like they don't all go that way. So I don't want to paint a picture of like,
Yeah. Every audience is going to be
Yeah,
different. You're
right,
gonna have one
but
audience that
it's
stands
like-
up, another audience, but they don't all stand up. You know,
yeah, and
It could
but
be.
it's like, and adults get into it too. So I'm like, really? That blew your mind? So I mean, it's just it's fascinating. It's heartwarming, and it's heartening to know, like, yeah, sometimes it's nice to just to see, you know, old stuff told in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think kids need that. And sitting in a classroom, it's good to get out and say, here's another way to learn something.
Yeah,
That's interesting. So
another way.
another way of learning something.
Yeah.
You were about to talk about you wanted to get into where you are today, presently. Did we get into that? Like, where are you
Yeah,
now?
I talked about what I was doing for my job.
For your job? Okay, so
Yeah.
that's where you are now.
Yeah,
So,
yep.
okay, there's a new initiative you're working on? Like another side project? It sounded like you were...
Oh, sure.
we all
like-
have... Like, I'm doing a podcast now,
Yeah,
so
it's like it's
that's my
like
side thing now.
I've you know, let's use the juggling as a metaphor. It's like I want irons in the fire. You
Right.
know? So I've got
We thrive on that, some of us. We just
Yeah.
If there's no irons in the fire, it's like we're not alive.
yeah, I'm just like that project oriented person's like I want to do the thing, and for as restless as that makes me sometimes, because I'm like, I'm not doing the thing fast enough.
Right,
It's like,
right.
chill out, lady. But
Yeah.
I've got Starry Messenger as my educational outreach initiative, and I want to do stuff with the moon and Mars and
You heard about the Mars New Year, right?
the Mars New Year.
Yeah, the Mars PA. has-
Yes, you did tell me about this.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
yes.
they're actually I'm involved in that. I'll be there. They're having it in Mars, PA. They're celebrating the Mars New Year, which they celebrate it every year, but it's not every year.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
every
yeah.
22 months. So Mars takes a long time to
Oh,
go,
yeah.
to go around the sun. But that's a cool thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of STEM there. There's Legos. There's a lot of, I think there's even art. There might be some STEAM there too, but I think it might be something you could check.
Do
out.
they have an interplanetary circus artist?
I happen to know the event organizer.
Well,
And
we
I'm
should
not sure
talk
it's
about
fully
that.
booked yet, but we can find out. Here's something off the
See,
cuff.
that was some networking going
Right
on
there.
there.
Yeah, I have
Yep,
to
yeah.
introduce you. Appleseed Events, Amanda Becker. She is very good, and she does the Moraine State Park Regatta, which might be a little thing on the side. Because they
Maybe.
have tents with demonstrations. You could do a thing there. That might be something I connect you with. Here's something I just learned about astronomy, and I've watched documentaries all day long,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm subscribed to Quora. Is it
Okay.
Quora Digest? You ever get those emails?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
They're really
yeah.
strange, but they figure you out and they start sending you stuff.
Yeah,
You like.
yeah. I used to get those for a minute, I think.
Someone posted a question. Is it true that Jupiter does not orbit the sun? And I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And I read about it, and it said Jupiter does not orbit the sun. It's in its own thing with the sun. The analogy was, if you pick up your daughter and your kid and you swing them around, there's a center of gravity.
So I was going to say, there's
Cyber
like a
center of gravity
central...
just outside the sun's border. There's like, you can put a dot,
Uh-huh.
and they're spinning around each other like a dance.
Yeah,
They're keeping each other, and the other planets are just in an orbit, but it's not for the same reason. Jupiter and the sun are in their own dance.
that's wild.
I didn't even know that. I'm like, that is fascinating that those two planets are just doing their own thing, and it happens to be in an orbit.
That's wild.
This is one of those things where it looks like an orbit, but it's not.
Jupiter, you wily thing.
Isn't that something?
Like,
biggest, and almost every solar system has a Jupiter-type planet. That
Yeah.
size, that far away from it, because it helps the rest of the planets develop. It was bizarre. Anyway, I followed this stuff, and I thought, that is something I never knew. It blew my mind. And it showed the picture of the sun with a little X. That's the center of gravity between the two bodies. That's it's being spun around like that.
That makes sense.
I'm like, wow. Anyway, off the subject. But I thought being a fellow person who's fascinated with this sort of stuff, you have to do some research on it.
Yeah, Jupiter blows my mind more often than the other planets, to be honest with you. It's not because it is more mind-blowing. I don't want to diss the other planets.
Right, yeah.
But it's just the volume of facts that hit me about Jupiter and why it's Jupiter blows my mind. Like, to think that the atmospheric pressure of Jupiter, it's a gas giant, it doesn't have terra firma.
Right, we can't walk on it.
is so intense. The pressure is so intense that at its core, it's theorized that it has a core of metallic hydrogen. Metallic hydrogen. That blows my mind. Anyway, yeah. Or at least it was the documentary I watched several years ago. So maybe that theory got thrown out the window for all I know. But
it could change the more the information they have. That's what science is all about.
Exactly.
So Starry Messenger is a website. Is that starrymessenger.com? What is your website?
StarryMessengerPGH.com.
Pittsburgh. Okay, gotcha. And how do people hear about you to know what you do?
They listen to stuff like this.
A podcast, yeah.
Or I get in their ear, or I get in their inbox.
You know how to. You have like a list of people you send, Starry messages to.
I don't. I should have an emailing list, but I usually rely on my network pretty well. The one that I've been forging for over a decade.
And that networking meeting we were at.
Yeah.
Was that what you were doing? Like just out to talk, just to meet people?
I'm in a weird state of flow when I'm networking.
Yeah.
So I just like doing that, and through my social. Through Starry Messenger PGH on Facebook, Instagram. It's Starry Mess PGH on Twitter.
Oh, because someone else had Messenger?
I don't know. I'm not going to try to figure Twitter
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But, and on LinkedIn, you look me up as Lyndsay Surmacz, and,
How do you spell Surmacz?
Surmacz.
CZ. Okay. Thought there was a T.
Very Polish.
Oh, is it Polish?
Uh-huh.
I thought all Polish names had a ski at the end of them.
Well, they do too.
People think I'm Polish because my last name is Marshki, and it's a German name.
Yeah.
But I'm not German.
Yeah.
I'm like mostly Irish, British. But I didn't know that until I took one of those DNA tests.
Yeah.
Damn, I thought I was German all this time, and I wasn't. I was British Irish. I'm like, all right, I have to visit Ireland someday.
Yeah.
So that's great. Is there anything else that we don't know about Starry Messenger that you wanted to get out?
Other than,
What's your future plans for it? I mean, what's your next step? How do you take this to the next level? How do you picture you're at schools teaching kids? Is there a next level?
For me, the next level, and my gut and heart, is more programs, developing new programs. Because
revisiting the ones you're doing now and seeing the results and the feedback, I'm sure when you do a performance, you get some feedback and make some adjustments based on what you've seen and heard.
Yeah, and also just new content.
Yeah.
It's like I'd like to be somebody in addition to being, the lady in the starry jacket and the planet Earth hat.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to be something else, like do something with Mars and music.
Oh, yeah.
And the moon, and just like I like making stuff.
Yeah.
So I love to do that. And also we're about to head into summer.
Yeah.
So that's usually if I'm gigging as Starry Messenger, that's a lot of like camps or like outdoor venues that are saying like, hey, can we get some Circus in the Stars? I'm like, hit me up. I'll let you know if I can come, and we'll do it.
You
So
have Camp Conakry out in Zealand Opal area?
I've
like
heard
a
of
day
it.
camp for kids. Like they have day camps all summer long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the kids at that age, my daughter went there when she was like 9, 10, 11. Went there with friends. They all bunk out, stay there for like a week or two. That might be a great venue for you to reach out to them and say, hey, this is something we can perform for those kids.
I wonder if that's the one my nephew did. It might be. I know they do some circus stuff, if I'm thinking of the right one.
Yeah,
But
it's
maybe.
a huge campus. It's got a little lake pool and the river. And
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that is the one. But yeah. And also I'm still doing the aerial arts thing. We have our student showcase at Iron City Circus Arts coming
Really?
up June
Where's
23rd
that
and
at?
24th. It's in the brew house
in the brew house, where's that?
on the south side.
On the south side, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to perform there?
Yeah.
And you do a high wire act at the brew house? What are you doing?
It's not a high wire. I have my own portable wire.
Okay.
That's like sitting in front of my TV at home, but it's like a foot and a half off the ground. It's about 10 feet long, and it's a self-supporting rig. So
Okay, and you're doing acrobatics on that.
yeah, that's the plan. That's the goal. I've done, what apparatuses have I done performing wise? Silks, straps, trapeze, and hoop.
So that's your living room. You can watch TV, kind of hanging from the ceiling.
I can't hang from the ceiling in my
Oh,
living room,
that's right, yeah.
but I can in the circus studio.
Yeah, okay. So there's a circus studio in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Where circus people get together and perform. Now, what do they do on the side?
Well, the performing troupe is Iron City Aerial, and you see them a lot at like open air events or corporate events, weddings.
Oh, yeah, I've been to some stuff where you've
And
had...
another group I'm part of, Pittsburgh Circus Arts Collaborative, does a lot of the same type of stuff, like certain clientele.
Yeah.
That's more of a ground-based discipline. So like me, I juggle,
Yeah.
and the you have a couple other jugglers, stilt walkers, contortion. Like jack of all trades. There
So
we go
basically, if they
again.
wanted it, if someone came to that organization and said, we have this venue, we can support X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And you can bring a juggler in, maybe a wire act and
Mhm.
contortionist, and have them perform there. That's pretty awesome. I didn't know that about Pittsburgh. That's pretty cool. Is there anything you want to tell us before we go, before we wrap this up? About STEAM and getting some steam for STEAM, getting it rolling? My daughter loves art. She loves the fact there should be an A in STEM, and she loves that idea. So
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
I tell people to keep looking up, and because circus has a way of getting you to look up at like trapeze and jugglers and all that stuff, and keep looking up at the sky.
Do you have a message for educators?
Do I?
Any recommendations or advice on? It's tough because they have a agenda and they have to meet certain requirements, and schools are very rigid.
Yeah. Do I have a message?
If they want any messages if they want to incorporate something more creative or an unconventional approach to enhance children's learning experience.
Well, you got circus.
Yeah.
Somebody who can, if you want some circus, hit me up. If I have to say anything to educators, it's probably just my sincere gratitude for what they've done for me throughout my career as a learner and now as a professional, and also what they have to deal with a lot of times, including the bureaucracy. You know, it's not for everybody. I know there are some things that'll break your heart in education.
Yeah.
And like, I have 2 siblings who are like career classroom educators, and I'm like, yeah.
You've heard the inside story.
Yeah, well, they do.
Yeah,
they do. So I appreciate the people who have followed that calling, for sure.
Good. Well, thank you. That was fascinating.
Thank you.
I'm glad
fun
we
talking
met by
about
accident at that networking. That's what networking is all about.
Yeah.
Making these interesting connections, and I'm glad we have a podcast that kind of get this information out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to share this with anybody. So thanks again for being with us today.
Well, thank you.